Et
Welcome back, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it featured on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your experiences, so please get a hold of me and let's get yours on a future episode of Uncomfortable. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65, and please remember to leave us a 5-star rating and review where you can. That's the main way that you, the listener, can help get this show out in front of more people. And with more people listening, that means more people coming forward with their experiences. Head over to Uncomfortable Podcast on YouTube and check out the show in its video form. And while you're there, please hit subscribe and notification bell. That way you will be made aware every time I upload a video version of the podcast, which this episode is no different. I will be doing that as well. If you're interested in helping support the show, head over to patreon.com/uncomfortablepodcast770 and check out the 3 levels we have there. Or if a standalone contribution is more to your liking, you can do that as well through Red Circle, the sponsors this podcast link. Those and the Discord server will be in the show notes below. Bigfoot and Brews and Spirits 2 will be September 14th with the VIP dinner the night before. Both will be held at Sister Lakes Brewing Company in Dowagiac, Michigan. Confirmed are speakers Amy Boo from the Olympic Project and Project Zoo Book, Scott Tompkins from the Bigfoot Mapping Project, Salt Fork State Park's naturalist John Hickenbottom, and special guest author and journalist Chatan Noir. The paranormal part of the show will be headed up by the Archbishop Christina Rake to round out the day. Tickets will be on sale soon, no later than the second week of March. I will put out a special announcement as soon as those are available. Tonight, we're going to step back into the Wayback Machine and dive into some of the more significant historical UFO flaps that permeated the U.S. with my guest, author, and researcher, William Van Huss. William puts on the Wytheville UFO Fest happening June 8th in Wytheville, Virginia, and it is in the 3rd year of its operation. If you're ready, let's get into it. Please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to William Van Huss. William, welcome to Uncomfortable.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us, man. I appreciate you. Interesting stuff. We're talking about my gateway drug into this paranormal realm. This is the UFOs were the first thing that I was completely obsessed with. You know, you can look back and you know, kind of guesstimate when you first started thinking about these things or really getting into it. I'm lucky enough to have a very hard, fast thing that I can look back at, and that is Chariots of the Gods, the documentary based on Eric Van Daniken's book. Came out in 1975, and I bugged the shit out of my parents, and my grandmother finally took me on a day that she was babysitting me, and my world was pretty much forever changed with seeing that. So it was quite impactful. In fact, I've talked about this before. I looked over at the seat where my grandma was, and she was in the theater snoring, snoozing, drooling. And, you know, at 5.5 years old, I can remember looking at her thinking, how can you be sleeping through this? This is amazing. And I've been hooked ever since.
I was about the same age. And for me, it was, it was this book called, it was called Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. And it was a Reader's Digest book.
Yep. I remember it.
And it had all these different things in it. It's probably about 1980 or something. And it had all these different, everything from Jack the Ripper and Spring Hill Jack to like the Marie Celeste and, missing, ghost ships and things like that. Yeah. And then UFOs, UFOs were the most to me was like I was the most fascinated by that. And of course, all the ancient aliens, Von Daniken type of stuff was still very much alive. You know, the
Yeah.
70s were still pretty alive in 1980.
Yeah. Yeah, they
So
were.
I'm a good dose of that, you know, In Search of and
In
stuff
search
like
of
that.
In search of was a big one. That
Hmm.
was something that, man, I looked forward to that show every week, and it was with bated breath and anticipation to finally hear what was going to be on that episode. And you know, if it didn't have something to do with the weird stuff that I was into, I'd be like, ugh, I waited a whole week, and it's, you know,
Yeah,
but
I know the feeling.
so Wytheville UFO Fest.
Yeah.
You're going into your third year. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, we started it on the actually on the 35th anniversary of the Wytheville UFO wave, which was a pretty big wave of UFO sightings starting in 1987, but it went for several years. Um, and we live pretty close to there, but we're about like 45 minutes away or something. But all that was still because it was happening in the region. It was all happening around here too. So I had my only UFO sighting was right after that. You know,
So
at that time,
you literally had a sighting of your own.
yeah. And this was in '91, so it was like a couple years after the Wytheville UFO sighting. Usually they say it's like a couple of years, like 87, 88, 89, something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it was still going on by the early '90s. In fact, after I wrote the book, I wrote Saucers Over Appalachia. After I wrote that, I got people contacting me from around here telling me about their sightings that they'd had around that same time that I did. But mine was like what happened was I was coming back from the grocery store and I was picked up groceries for my mom, and we lived out in the country and we didn't have any lights around or anything, so I had a great view of the sky. And like I said, I'd been interested in UFOs my whole life, but I'd never seen one or never even. I thought it was something that was like so rare that I would never see it.
Yeah.
But I was getting out of the car, I was bringing the groceries in, and I just happened to look up at the sky. And when I looked up, I noticed like there was this, field of stars, and then amongst those stars there were a bunch of stars that were brighter than all the rest of the stars, and they were all moving. And I was like, "What is going on here?" And it really like gave the impression of what it looked like was the way things move underwater. So it was like all these. There was about 12 of them, and they were all moving around like they would move. Like some of them would move like this way, some of them move this way. It was real kind of random
Okay.
and
Yeah.
chaotic, and they were like kind of floating that way. And so I told my mom, and she didn't want to come outside.
Oh,
And then I
really?
went I went back outside and sat down. We had a little bench out there on the porch, and I sat down on the bench and just started watching them. And then one of them like stopped moving, and then another one went and made a whole circle around it, and then they shot a beam of light back and forth between the two of them.
No
And then
kidding.
it kept, yeah, and it kept going on. I mean, I can still see it like in my mind as if it just happened. It's one of those things that made such an impression on me. I'm
How
like,
old were you?
wow.
How old were you at the time?
I was about 18, 17, 18.
So you were
And
past the point of being a child with a
yeah,
crazy imagination, or
yeah, that was the year I graduated from high school. So I, re- I remember it very well. And I watched it for, they were still going. I watched it for probably about a half an hour, and then I went inside and they were still going when I went inside. But they were, I've only seen a couple of other descriptions that really, really matched what I saw, but I have seen a couple where people have said that they'd seen something like that.
it's interesting to me that so many times, and I think this is part of the problem with social media and TikTok and Instagram, and everybody that has one of these in their hands and they're taking videos or faking videos. There's these 30 to 40 second clips that they hit us, and it's like, what happened to the 10 minutes before? What happened to the 10 minutes after this
Yeah.
clip? And it gives me pause, because if I can't see things that are leading up to, I mean, I get being shocked by something and pulling your camera out and start filming. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But there is just to edit everything else out of it, I think becomes disingenuous on the part of the person who uploads it, because now you've eliminated my ability, and I'm sure other people's ability, to kind of suss out the situation, the reaction, and all these things. So
Yeah.
with the more and more, with the advent of AI and being able to create all these crazy pictures and videos with AI, man, unfortunately, I got to start throwing a lot of things out with the bathwater, because
Yeah.
you
It's like,
just don't know.
yeah, somebody, you're trying to like doctor the evidence, when you're like, you're selectively leaving certain things in and certain things out,
Right.
Unfortunately, by the way, I apologize for my erratic camera movements right now. You'd think I was filming a UFO at this moment, but I just don't. I'm just on my phone. But yeah, it would have been nice to have had a camera at that time. But honestly, I don't think it would have shown up very well. I mean, you would have seen it. You would have seen lights moving around. But that's the thing with UFOs, and like a lot of times people think that that they're going to get these. Why don't? Because everybody has these cameras with 4K, or these phones with 4K cameras
Yeah.
and things, then why don't we have all this amazing footage of UFOs? But go out right now and try to film the moon, and see what that looks like.
Yeah.
It's not very amazing,
Well, it's
So
interesting that your experience was as prolonged as it was,
mhm,
and that you saw multiple craft and they were moving around each other. It's
mhm,
very, very similar to a gentleman that I follow out of Canada. His name's Justin Trapinski, and
mhm,
he's got a Bigfoot channel that's called Mountain Beast Mysteries, and he's been doing it for years, and he does a really good job. He's never fabricating anything. He's rarely ever really finds anything. Just has some odd occurrences that happen while he's out and filming.
right,
The guy's got King Kong size yabos, because I mean, he goes out by himself, and he doesn't have a crew with him. He films his own stuff. But I think he moved fairly recently into a bigger city in Canada, and he's been getting this video on multiple nights of these lights, very much like what you're talking about. Several of
mhm,
them moving in unison, moving around each other, and the skies over Canada seem to be alive with these things. And I haven't seen any of them that actually look like they're shooting a light between the two of them, but the movement that
mhm.
you were describing, very, very similar to the videos that he's getting.
Yeah, it's unusual. The first thing I ever saw that kind of sort of put me in the mind of that and reminded me of that sighting that I had was, I remember probably 2005 or something like that, when I first saw the NASA videos. Of when you have you seen those from like the space
Hmm.
station with the disc shaped things
Yes.
that kind of look like they had a hole in the middle of them,
When the tether was had broke loose.
all that.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that I was like, that I thought, oh wow, that's the closest I've seen, because they look like underwater, creatures swimming or something,
Mhm.
like moving through the water, and that's kind of what this looked like. It was extremely, just very unusual. Like if I had it my way, I would have seen a silver saucer,
Classic,
but I
classic
didn't.
saucer.
Yeah, yeah. But if I could have chosen what I would have seen, then that would have been something like that. But you get what you get.
Yeah, the closest that I can ever say that I came to, I've seen a couple of things in the sky. Um,
Mm,
One fairly recently, like within the last 8 months, broad daylight, sitting in my living room, looking out through the picture window, and I saw what looked to be about maybe 2.5 times the size of a crow.
mm,
Okay. It was long. again, but about 2.5 times the size of a crow. It was in the center of it. It was very low profile, and it was very long and narrow, but about center mass on this thing, there was I mean, I guess if I was going to have to describe it, I would say that it would have probably been like a clear globe, and had like mirrors or something inside of it that were turning, that were reflecting all different colors of light, like blues and reds. And it was very flashy and very, very strange. And it was moving faster than a bird, but it wasn't like a blur. I stood up, grabbed my phone, but by the time I had gotten my phone up to the point where I was going to, try to access the camera, it had gone beyond the tops of the trees. I couldn't see it anymore.
Wow.
And it was very strange. It was at about the height, I would say, from my perception of it, it would have been, like I said, about 2.5 times the size of a crow. And it would have been flying at about the same altitude as what I'm used to seeing birds flying. Because we have a lot of oak trees on the other side of the street, and they would roost in those oak trees all the time. So we've had crows forever, and there's a lot of them. So I'm used to seeing them on a regular basis. And this was, not a whole lot bigger. It was definitely a narrower body. I didn't see anything that would have indicated that there were wings. It was very strange. And the other thing that I had happen was when I was about 13, Friday or Saturday night, don't remember what it was. I think probably was a Friday night, because that's usually the night my parents went out. My grandma lived with us, so she was at home, and it was about 10:30, quarter to 11 at night. I was watching Creature Feature on the Son of Svengoolie out of Chicago. And, it was summertime. The windows were open. The screen door was open. And all of a sudden, man, our dark neighborhood just lit up super, super bright. And it was like so bright that nothing left shadows. And I could remember standing up. I was laying on the floor. I was on the prone position on the floor with my hands under my chin, watching the show. And I had heard an airplane, because we live really close to South Bend Airport, regional airport, and it's international now. But we would have planes cross over where I lived, and I heard a plane coming. And when it got over the house, I can remember looking back at my grandma and saying, man, it seems like that plane's been going overhead for a long, long time. It just, there was no Doppler effect. You didn't hear it real quietly and then get loud and then get quiet again. It just stayed. And I don't remember if that sound was still going on when the light came on or not. But I remember standing up and looking out the window and looking across the street, and I could see inside the canopy of the trees. Even the backs of the leaves were lit up. Nothing was casting a shadow. I was seeing things in such detail. It was almost like, going from the first color TV that we ever had to what you have now with an 8K TV that is just like, you feel like you could put your hand into it. I mean, it was that much more vibrant. And, if I were to take a stab at how long the event lasted, I think it lasted, in my head, it's longer than what it really was, because just the amount of detail that I remember from looking out and seeing everything lit up that way. And then all of a sudden it just like somebody knocked a light switch off. And I looked as my grandma was pulling me away from the window. She said, get away from the window. It's probably a storm or something. And it was like, there was no storm. It wasn't raining. It wasn't lightning. There was no thunder. This was like a constant light that was on. And I can remember looking past it and seeing darkness beyond my neighborhood, which was weird.
Oh wow, that's
You know,
amazing.
that was,
What do you suspect that was behind that?
you know, I never saw any source of the light. I was in awe, you know, because I simply didn't understand what was happening. And
Yeah.
when she grabbed me to pull me away from the window, she pulled me by my right arm. So I turned and down down the corner of my street, it curves, and there's a dusk to dawn light that is on the telephone pole. And it was just starting to warm back up. So whatever it was, I had that little bit of proof that, you know, something was bright enough that it shut the light off. And then it was such an immediate back to darkness that it was starting to glow again to come back on.
Wow.
2 days later, my parents only got the newspaper on Sundays because they were cheap, and that was when the grocery ads would be in the newspaper. And I can remember that afternoon, my dad saying, "Hey, here's your freaking UFO story, kid." And he read, it was like maybe 5 lines in this tiny little article in the South Bend Tribune. And it said, residents of Hollyhock Road, just south of the state line, reported seeing lights, unusual lights over Claffey's Field. And
Hmm.
Claffey's Field and Claffey's Pond is directly outside my neighborhood. And the street that they named Hollyhock is the road that is right on the outside of my, if you drive out of my neighborhood, you turn onto Hollyhock Road. So
But they didn't give any possible explanations or
nope,
anything. They just said
nope.
they
They
saw
just said
light.
several
Oh,
residents of Hollyhock Road, just south of the state line, which is exactly where I was. You
yeah.
know, so I mean, there was a little bit of indication, but you know, other than that, I got nothing. So I don't know what the hell it was, but whatever it was,
That's pretty unusual. I don't know if I've heard of those of anything quite like
yeah,
that. It's
it was
very.
amazing. It was,
Mhm.
and like I said, I could see beyond what was lit up. I could see dark skies behind it, and
Yeah, that's what's
and
cool.
that
You
was
see, like
unusual.
you could see what was happening beyond it.
Yeah,
You know, which everything normally dark. How
that was
odd.
really unusual. So,
Yeah, that's
but that,
creepy.
I mean, that's pretty much the extent of what I think was probably a side effect of a UFO being around.
It could be.
But who knows?
It could be that it manifests in so many different ways. You know, I think it's like, and the thing that you said about the bird, like
Mm-hmm.
sized object
Yeah.
going by. You know, that's there's so many different things that I've heard that are, I think I agree with Jacques Vallée, and kind of have for a long time that that either there are like an almost unlimited number of extraterrestrial races and extraterrestrial craft that are just constantly visiting from so many different places, or it does the whatever it is, whatever the intelligence is, has some sort of effect on our consciousness, and then that's interpreted in different ways by, like you see what you're able to see, basically.
Yeah, that's
You
an
know.
interesting viewpoint, and I don't disagree with it. And you know,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
longer that I've been steeped in this, and the more that I delve into any and all of the weirdness, whether it be UFOs, Bigfoot, paranormal experiences, hauntings, you know, cover all of it here.
Mhm.
Um, I'm quickly becoming a little more rooted in the idea that what some of these government whistleblowers, like David Grush, are saying, that the ultra terrestrial or ultra dimensional, because I was always firmly under the idea that, or the belief that these things were coming from another place, you know, another
Yeah.
planet, another galaxy, another solar system, whatever. Um, and now, I mean, my gut is telling me that because of the the differences and the weirdness of how these things operate, how they kind of, I mean, because there's some videos, you know, that are a little bit longer in length, and it almost looks like they're phasing in and out uh, on their pathway as they travel, and it's like, you know, I mean, obviously we don't understand any of that technology. I imagine
Yeah.
someplace here in the world does have a better understanding of that technology than we do. But, um, you know, I'm really kind of starting to think that these things are just, they're here with us. But
I think that's the case. I think the first, I guess, you know, I've read various theories over the years, but I think probably like, John
Mhm.
Keel, and it like him and Jacques Vallée both kind of came up with this ultra terrestrial thing around the same time, you know, early '70s, you know, to just account for the wide
Yeah.
variety, you know. And then Jacques Vallée kind of like is, you know, he said, you know, it also can account for the past, you know, when we go back into like angels and we, you know, and all these different things or whatever, you know, interpretations from the past of the same, you know, he would say that helps account for the past as well, you know, like where we had the different interpretations over the years, and then and our interpretation of these things being spaceships from another planet obviously comes at the time when we're making spaceships and things, you know, and rocket science and all this is happening. And
Right. And you know, Hollywood sci-fi was a huge uh, proponent of that. You know, I mean, anytime you saw anything from outer space, I mean, they were from outer space. They were coming from other planets.
oh yeah,
Um, you know, and I mean, that's imagination and Hollywood magic. But um, you know, the longer I'm into it, I'm really starting to think that those things are right here with us, whether they're on a different plane, whether it's our visual, our ability, the frequency that our eyesight is able to see.
hmm,
Um, you know,
yeah, that's what I think. It's like, you know, there things like was it the do you ever read H.P. Lovecraft at any
mhm,
point in your life?
yeah.
Where when I was young, I was a teenager, I used to read Lovecraft and stuff a lot, and I remember he had a story. I think it was From Beyond, and it was like this scientist had come up with this device, and with this device, you were able to see what was really going on around you, you know.
Hmm.
And
Like
so there's
Dicenian goggles.
yeah, all this other crazy activity, and it was like this insane, like, you know, these beings that were, you know, intelligent beings that were like disembodied, that were just floating around, and you know, all this kind of crazy stuff that was going on. I'm beginning to think that maybe it's more something like that, or yeah, I mean, there's also you know, the theories about like that they live inside the earth, or the theories that they live under the ocean, or the or I also like the time travel uh theories, because there's a lot of interesting evidence for that, you know.
You think there's a possibility that they're us from the future?
Yeah, either us or some other occupants of this planet in the future, you know, because
Mm,
there's no guarantee that we'll be here, you know, in 50,000 years, or, you know,
that's true.
whatever.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, when you look at the past, you look at the history of the planet and you go, "Oh, well, let's go back 10 million years, you know, there's no people, you know, there's no
Right.
you know, and you go back another, you know, 50 million years, you know, and it's all dinosaurs, and, you know, you go back more, and there's different things keep happening, so it's entirely possible that there would be something just completely different than us, you know, that would emerge, you know, in another you know, million years or something like that.
Yeah, I
Also,
mean,
travel.
I'm really starting to buy into the whole, you know, like whether you want to call it different dimensions or um, gateways between time. that we're seeing into, that those things, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs or, the Loch Ness Monster. I mean, I talked to a gentleman and I actually talked to two guys independently who were in the same car and witnessed the same event in New Mexico, probably about a year ago, that the three gentlemen that were in the car, they witnessed what they could only describe as about a 3.5 foot long pterosaur.
Oh, wow.
Fly across the highway that they were on and cross over the hood of the car and off to the driver's side of the vehicle.
That's awesome.
Leathery wings, a spade tail, a long extended beak, a point at the back of the head. They said it literally just dropped their jaws to the floor because it looked like something out of Jurassic Park. And, does it make sense that, that's a remote location. So, did something survive? Are they in a small number still alive somewhere? That's possible. But, are we coming across these like tears in our reality?
Well, I think we probably come across those more than we think. Have you ever had the experience where you and in all seriousness, the experience where you laid your keys on the sofa or on the table? You know where you laid your keys. You saw yourself lay them there. You walked away. You came back looking for them. They're not there, right? You look right where you laid them at, like here on the sofa. Well, I know I put them right here. Then you spend another hour looking around the house for them.
Mm-hmm.
Then you come back and they're right there on the sofa.
Yeah.
You ever had that happen?
I actually, in my episode that I just aired today, I actually talk about a situation that I purchased a piece of jewelry for my girlfriend, and it was a custom thing. It was something that I put a lot of thought into, and the woman that created it sent me a picture of it, and it was beautiful. I loved it. She sent it to me, and I opened it up, and it was it's still, everything was the same, but there was a different aspect to it, and it did not look like the pictures that she had sent me originally. And I was a little disappointed because I had my heart set on what she had sent me the picture of. It was still the same shape. It still had all the same components that I asked for. It was different, and it bugged me. It bugged me a lot. And I was going to give this to my girlfriend for Christmas. And I finally, I had to justify it. It's like, my girlfriend didn't know anything about what it looked like. She wasn't going to know any different. It was still a beautiful, beautiful piece of jewelry. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to wrap it and I'm going to give it to her. She doesn't need to know anything about it. And I got tired of kind of obsessing over the fact that it wasn't what I expected from the previous picture. And I had even sent a message to the girl that designed it and made it. And I said, I didn't realize, I didn't want to bitch about it, but I didn't want to, I had to say something, it was just kind of eating at me. And I said, I didn't realize that you were going to fill all that area in. I thought you had negative space in there before. I thought it was going to be like that. And she responded to me by saying, I hate empty spaces. I'm kind of OCD about that. So, and it was fine. It was a beautiful piece. And so I gave it to her, and she opened it up, and it was exactly like what the picture was. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Because I had looked at that thing for, the better part of 2 weeks before I wrapped it. And I wrapped it just to get it out of my head, just to be like, I can't obsess about this anymore. And when she opened it and it looked the way it was supposed to look, I was like,
yeah, see what I mean? Pterosaur.
No idea.
Yeah, pterosaur. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like reality. I don't think reality is as fixed as we would like it to be.
I'm starting to believe that. I really am. The Mandela effects, some of them I think are horseshit. Other ones, I'm like,
most of that's just people not remembering things right.
But there's a few that really kind of perked my ears up, and because I remember specifically, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, like to the point where I would not make a mistake that Darth Vader said, "Luke, I'm your father," versus "No, I'm your father."
Yeah.
I've watched that movie so many times and went to see it so many times at the theater. That to me, that's one that sticks with me. It's like somebody's messing here. I don't think that, I don't know that I believe, I don't know that I believe that those are shifts in our reality as much as, maybe for whatever reason, some kind of a psyop to see what they can get over on us.
Well, do you remember the story? You've probably heard this one before about the guy. And there are several stories that are similar, but the one I'm thinking about is the guy who was a pilot, and it was back, I believe it was in England, and this was in like I want to say it was like the 1970s, late 60s, early 70s or something. And this guy was flying and uh, over an airfield in Scotland, and once he got to the airfield, like there had been some bad weather and those instruments were doing crazy things, and he was flying on just on instruments there for a while. It's Scottish gray skies, and then once he emerges, he knew he was supposed to be near this airfield, and when he emerged near the airfield and he looked down to see it, he could see the airfield, but it was all World War II fighter planes on the airfield,
I do
even though this
remember
was
that.
like
They actually,
1968.
yeah, they actually made a Twilight Zone. It was, yeah, I think it was Twilight Zone. Either Twilight Zone or Night Gallery did an episode that was based on that story.
Yeah, so something like that, and it's just like, and he didn't land, he didn't land so he could go out and say, "Hey, are you guys from 1945 or anything?" It's like he just kept going, and then he ended up like going back to his place, and then he ended up going and researching, looking up photos of that airfield during the war, and sure enough, during the war, like they had fighter planes there, and then they had the people were wearing, because he said he saw the guys wearing these blue jumpsuits out there
Mm-hmm.
on the fueling planes and stuff, and he saw the he found out through like researching it that that's what they wore there and stuff, that the things were accurate,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. How strange
it
would
could be
that
one of
be?
those weird, yeah, one of those weird, and then you miss the opportunity of stopping,
Yeah.
that's what's wild, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I would have landed. That would have, if I had seen that seems like that would have been a little too weird. I think.
I would have probably landed. I would have. Okay, being 50 years old, I probably would have landed. Now, if I was draft age, I might not have landed.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Let's get into the flap. Let's get into the flap from 73.
Let's go.
What what do you think the catalyst was? What was, I mean, because we're talking, near 100 different events, really, and hundreds of people reporting these events.
Mm-hmm.
What's what would you say is like a timeline as far as when did this start? I know that it didn't necessarily end in 73. It continued on, and
Mm-hmm.
so tell me what you know about it.
Well, it's tough to say when one flap ends and another begins, really, because there was this theory that has been that's resurfaced a few times over the years about like a 61-month cycle, I think it is, something like that, or a 5-year cycle of for UFO flaps. But really, in the research that I've done over the years, I don't find that this holds too much weight, because if you look at, that's only if you're restricting your um, scope to like one country, like America or something. But if you're looking at it worldwide, there seems to be no end,
Yeah.
and there's never really an end. Of course, there's like maybe there's more sightings this month or whatever than there was the last month, but in the case of the 1973 one, as far as America is concerned, but there were a lot of sightings that year also in South America, and of course other places in the world. But as far as North America, United States is concerned, um, it seemed like earlier in the year, it almost mirrored the 1896, 87, 97 airship wave, a little bit, because it kind of started out west earlier in the year. You get more reports out west. Then for some reason, you start getting around April or so, you start getting more reports in the Midwest. And it isn't until the fall, really late summer, early fall, that you start getting the reports in the South. And those are the ones that are most remembered from that year, because that's when Pascagoula abduction, happened. And in October, September, October is really when it kind of started ramping up. Um, and then of course it kept going. But I think I think the peak of it, though, it really overall probably was late summer and fall, even though there were tons of reports all over the country really before that.
Do we have a guesstimate or an estimate of how many um, significant events there were during that time?
Oh man, I mean, you can go to like I think NICAP, the archived website for NICAP, has a whole bunch of them. What they considered significant, but if you look at that, you're probably going to find, in a neighborhood of like 50, 60, 70, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's almost none of them are any of the ones that I found, so, it'd be hard to say. I would imagine that would be, in the hundreds, maybe 1,000, that would be like significant enough to have made the newspapers. Because if you were to go, no one had ever done this research on this region that I live in, uh, and that's when I did the book Saucers Over Appalachia. That's what I was doing, the region. I was doing this region
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that the 1973 wave as a whole is like such a broad scope. It'd be hard to do unless, I mean, you could maybe do 1,000-page book or something
Yeah.
like that, like to describe them all. But what I wanted to do was to do this region. And what I encouraged other people to do in the book was like go to your library wherever you live, and look up, go to the microfiche and look up all the newspapers around you and see when it happened where you are, because I bet you it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you there was a bunch of the front pages of all the newspapers in your region were covered up in UFO stories for at least a week. Just about no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And in our area, and this is like East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, um, this really 5-state type of region. Like you have West Virginia right there that touches Virginia, and then you have a little bit of Kentucky, a little bit of North Carolina there.
And
And
even
in our
Ohio too.
Yeah, there was a bunch in
Yeah.
Ohio.
What is it about that region? What is it about that? Because it's not just UFO stuff. Ohio is thick with Bigfoot reports. Tennessee is thick with Bigfoot reports.
Yeah.
You have so much high strangeness that takes place in the Appalachians, and you've got everything from people that are still worshiping the little g gods, Lilith and those things, and there's just so much strangeness, and the show Hellier. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not.
No.
Miniseries. I think it was on Prime. Um, you know, whether that was all true or whether that was written, either way, it was a very interesting show. If it was made up, kudos to them for making it up, because that sucked me in and enthralled me for the entire length of the show. but it kind of highlighted the weirdness of that region and that area, you know. And what is it about those states? I mean, are there ley lines there, or are there, you know, is there some kind of triangle that we don't know about?
We've always suspected it. Like most of the people that I know have always said it, like talked about things like that. Of course, we've always lived here, so I don't know what it would be like to not live in an area like that much. But you know, there's things like the Brown Mountain Lights.
Mhm.
You know, have you ever heard of
I
that?
have, yeah, and they
Um,
actually have something very similar to that up in northern Michigan, above on the upper peninsula above Wisconsin. It's called the Paulding
mhm.
Light, and I've actually been there 3 times, witnessed it.
Yeah,
It's a bizarre thing.
yeah. Brown Mountain Lights is about an hour away from us, and then there's another place that's very near us. It's just an odd anomaly that and it's off of an exit. So if you're going down this highway, there's an exit off the highway, and the exit kind of goes downhill. You know, it goes at a little, not a steep grade, but you know, a gradual
Hmm.
downhill like that. You know, and then there's a stop sign at the bottom of that exit. And then you can go to the bottom of that exit in your car and stop your car and put your car in neutral, and your car will go back up the exit. You know,
Yeah,
one of those weird gravitational anomalies or something. There's a lot of real strange things, and I've known people that have seen like the little uh, like elf type beings or whatever in the woods, you
goblins.
know, yeah, whatever. Yeah, like a little weird, like kind of forest elemental or something,
Yeah,
you know. I've known people have seen things like that. I've known people that have said they've seen you know, the big Black Panther, you know, odd thing to see. Of course, UFO sightings and things like that, you know. But I don't know, magical place, really. There's certain places on Earth, you know, like you know, and these mountains are so old. You know, it's the oldest mountain range in the
yeah.
world. You know, and Mount Shasta out in California is another one. You know, that has all this strange stuff attached to it. You know, it's just certain places. I don't know if it's ley lines or what it is, and but yeah, it definitely attracts high strangeness. That's for sure.
So this flap was not just like just conventional looking 1950s sci-fi saucers. We had um, reports of cigar shaped. We had reports of triangular shapes. Um, you know, and triangular shapes have not been that popular until fairly recently. You know, say the last 10, 15 years. Now we're hearing a lot about the triangular shapes. But you know, even back then in 73, you know, there were triangular shapes, cigar shapes.
Mm.
There were the classic saucer shapes. There were um, illuminated blue mists that were showing up. People were seeing lights in the woods or just above the tree lines. Um,
Well, the in the Wytheville UFO wave, in you know, it's beginning in '87. Um, there were triangular craft in that, and then that's also the Belgian UFO wave in like '89. Around that same time, there was a triangular craft were really a major part of that. Um, and then, of course, if you think of the Phoenix
yeah,
Lights, you know, which could have been like one enormous triangular craft if we know, you know, we'd have no idea, I guess, because nobody really got to see it, but it, um, illuminated in that way, you know. But that could be, or the what's the one in Rendlesham
mm-hmm,
Forest?
yeah,
It was like
yeah,
81 or something like that. That was kind of a triangular type of
yeah,
thing. Um, and then a lot of times that gets related when people talk about the triangular ones, they get really lumped into like, oh, well, this one's secret, you know, government
right.
stuff, you know.
Which you
But
know, I mean, I'm okay with that. I think there
mhm,
is probably some component of these sightings that is extraordinary craft that we have within our military. And I am
mhm.
firmly of the belief that as far as our security and our military is concerned, as far as protecting us and, you know, keeping us safe as a nation, We don't need to know everything. You know, I'm okay with there being secrets.
Oh yeah,
But
well, you have to have.
but I don't think all of this is military.
No, I mean, well, you're talking about the diversity of the sightings and the craft and things in the 1973 one, and uh, it's funny, back then you had a lot of craft like in the 60s and the 50s, and then still in the 1973 wave, you had a lot of craft that were like egg shaped, and you had a lot of craft that had that would have landings where they would have these little legs, like that type of stuff. So there were certainly a lot of that around this region, and there was uh, not so much in the triangular, but a lot of egg shape, a lot of cigar shape, a lot of saucer shape.
What's
A
the one
lot
I'm
of
thinking of that looked a lot like an acorn? Uh, did,
Kecksburg.
Kecksburg, yeah, that
Hmm.
were there any of those references to that kind of a shape?
No, but to that color, yeah, to a copper
Mm-hmm.
color. There was one in there's a little community called Watauga that's and a lot of times people mispronounce it Watuga or something like that, but I believe it was a Cherokee word that meant water, but there's a lake there. It's called Watauga Lake, a little redundant, um, but there's a little community there, and one of the sightings there was a woman who looked out her back door, and she had her kids were outside playing in the
Mm-hmm.
yard, and she looked, and this is like broad daylight, middle of the day. She looked outside and saw a circular, like a spherical, a copper colored craft descend into the backyard, almost to where it was touching the ground, but didn't land on the ground. And then a doorway open in the craft, and a being reach out to grab the kids. The kids take off running into the house, and then the craft zips off straight up into the air. Now you would think that, oh well, this is clearly made up, but several other people independently called the police that same day and reporting that a craft, copper colored spherical craft floating around the neighborhood. It's a very strange one.
That would creep me out.
Yeah,
That
that's a
would
weird one.
creep me out.
Like to be corroborated by other people, who didn't know this woman, who had also seen
Yeah,
it, But so you had like they called 1973 wave the year of the humanoids is what they call it, because there were so many abductions, and there were so many close encounters where people actually came in contact with the beings from the craft.
that's
Um,
interesting to me. Let's touch on some of those.
mhm. Well, that was one uh, that I just described that happened in our region, and then of course there was the Pascagoula one. That's probably the most famous. There was actually one that happened right after the Pascagoula one, where was also it wasn't in Mississippi, but it was in like Alabama, I believe, where police saw beings that they described as being like the Pascagoula ones, because that's one of those that you never hear any other
That was a
descriptions of,
very unique description of
because
an
they're
entity.
strange with the lobster
Yeah.
claws and the wrinkly skin and stuff. Like somebody else did describe that. I can't remember off the top of my head what the name of the town was, or the people that saw it, but it was there is another case out there with the description of those. Um, and of course there was you know a multitude of other beings like at the same time, and a lot of them usually they looked human.
Human in the
And
sense of actually looking human or just being a humanoid shape.
now I like looking human. And just like if you go back into when you go back into the 1950s and look at a lot of the cases back then, or even the 40s, even you go back to the 30s, there are cases back then, long before the, Kenneth Arnold and Roswell and all that. if you go back then, you find a lot of descriptions of human. They look just like humans, you know. And of course, you have your Nordic, you know, they call the
Right.
Nordic ones, you know, that always have the blonde hair and they're super hot and
Yeah.
and all that. But you also have ones that are just don't really fit that description, but they just look human, you know. And I think that might speak a little bit to the what we're that sometimes maybe we see uh, what we can cope with
Yep.
seeing, you know.
Yep. Exactly. That's the point I was going to get to as well. You know, like the Nordics are
Hmm.
usually always described as having long hair, thin, slender bodies, very
Hmm.
attractive, very, you know, beautiful people. Um,
Yeah,
if there's any
they
truth to the,
really
what's that?
they really know how to rock a blue
Yeah.
jumpsuit too.
You know, if there's any truth to, excuse me, if there's any truth to the valiant Thor uh,
Oh yeah,
mythos,
yeah.
um, you know, not long hair, very very stunning looking man. Um,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, there's photographs of him. Uh, you know, who knows if it was an actual thing or not?
Hmm.
But what do you?
But there were a lot, and you know, a lot of the contactees from that time, you know, and of course, many of these people, you know, Howard Menger or George Van Tassel or uh, George Adamski. A lot of those people at that time, you know, it was the aliens that they were describing were humans, you
And
know.
what was there any indication of what was the message that they were getting?
Those
Yeah.
contactees. Well, that message was always it was always pretty much the same. You know, it was about nuclear weapons. You know, it's about don't you know uh, they're interfering before we blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons, and to you know there's always a message. That's why you know they always called them the Space Brothers and
Hmm.
stuff. You know, they were always it was either a positive message and a very sort of precursor to a hippie kind of message, really, you know. In fact, you know, George Van Tassel lived his, you know, in California, and he had that's his place called. It was out near Joshua Tree, called Giant Rock, and it was because there was a giant rock there, but it was an airstrip, and his wife and him ran a. They owned this airstrip. He had worked for, I think he'd worked for maybe Boeing or something like that, but then he bought this little airstrip out there, and he and his wife had uh, ran this little cafe, and they had like the little airstrip where they refuel planes and stuff from private planes. Small planes flew there, and once he had his first contact experience, he started having these like conventions out there where he would have people come, and some of the other people came there. Like George Adamski came there, and and it sort of became like almost a little sort of uh, a bit of a hippie new age kind of a
Commune.
commune
Yeah.
type situation, you know, predating a lot of that, you know. So before, you know, we always had these positive messages, either that or somebody like Howard Menger who was like having sex with the aliens or whatever. But like you either had that kind of thing happening, uh, you know, and they were saying they were from Venus, you know, or something like that. And then, but by the time you get to the '60s, then you get into it's only then when you get into the Betty and Barney Hill type of, you know, abductions where it's there's these terrifying implications
Right.
about it, you know, and there's sort of a nightmarish experience. It's no longer the Space Brothers telling you how to live in peace, you know, that they're taking you and doing experiments upon you, you know. Very interesting how that
Yeah.
developed.
And I don't know. I guess I have a thought on that. And that thought is that, at least what I hope it is. Okay. Obviously, there's the possibility that there's multiple species, or if it's
Mm-hmm.
the same species, you have a good faction and a bad faction, just like you have good and bad people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the space brother thing seemed to be so prevalent for a good while. Um, and then we start getting the scary stuff. Then we start getting the abductions, the medical
Mm-hmm.
experiments or procedures being done, and you know that almost time wise almost lines up for me with about the time that we would have had the Roswell crash in our possession long enough that we may have been able to back engineer some certain components
Mm-hmm.
of it. And then, as far as the military is concerned, using that against our own people to find out how possibly other nations would react if they were to do a fake invasion or use that kind of technology to uh, go against another country in a wartime situation. Um, you know, the cattle mutilations and all that stuff just seems to me to be too weird to be something that somebody who spent God knows how much
Mm-hmm.
time coming to Earth or traveling through dimensions to get to where we are to go do
Mm-hmm.
dastardly things to cattle. Um, you know,
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really heard that, but it makes sense, you know. But and there's also like a lot of um, early '60s, late '50s, early '60s. You get a lot of uh, sightings that appear to be clearly, something man-made, like because these things aren't running
mm-hmm,
right, like they're making, you have the ones that are making a lot of noise when they're
right.
running.
And
You have
also
they're
seeing seams and seeing like literal
mhm,
nuts and bolts holding them together.
mhm. And seeing people, occupants of them that look like people, and that, like, for instance, like there was one I remember. I can't remember exactly when this happened, but I believe it was like late 1950s, early 60s, where this man came out and they asked him for water. Like the beings from the craft who looked like people, and they just got out and said that they needed some water, and he brought them water. And then that's when they gave him those little biscuits.
Oh, I do remember
Do
that
you
one. Yeah, I remember the
Yeah,
biscuits.
they gave him these little weird little pancake biscuit things. Like this sounds like
Yeah,
people. It sounds like some sort of, like, you have some that like have pipes visible on them and stuff. Which doesn't really sound like the type of UFOs that we're used to hearing about, or that would really blow your mind. Because if I saw something with some exhaust pipes on it, I'm going to assume that's of human
right.
origin.
What do you think the difference is? Why, like, so you take Roswell, the whole enduring story that Roswell, it's
Mhm.
just never gone away. And you've got the Rendlesham Forest incident. You've got the Betty and Barney Hill thing. You've got so many so many accounts that have captured our imagination for so long, and they've just not ever gone away. Um,
Mhm.
but now that we have whistleblowers, government whistleblowers, we have military people who are coming forward talking about seeing these things. Um, there seems to be a more matter of factness about how it's talked about, and you know, it doesn't have the same feel to me as these things. And is that just maybe a component to the way times were at the point where these other things had happened, or is there been a major shift?
Well, I think there's been a major shift in the government position. And I think when you think about people like, now I'm not, you know, I mean, no disrespect to anybody's military service or David Grush and his, I know he served in Afghanistan and all those things, but he is an intelligence
Correct.
officer, you know, and you have, and the other people that are coming from, that we've seen, we've seen a lot of people like Luis Elizondo. We've seen people like Christopher
Mm-hmm.
Mellon. We've seen people speaking out. A lot of the people speaking out about this are from the intelligence community. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but for 70 years or so, the intelligence community has called everybody
Yeah.
crazy that said, you know, and all of a sudden now we're allowing these people to frame the story, to frame the whole narrative. We're allowing them, they changed UFO to UAP. Now they want to frame it in such a way. It feels to me like they want to frame it in such a way that it's a national
Oh,
security
100%.
threat, and that we need more money for the intelligence community and we need more money for the Pentagon in order to deal with this Chinese balloons and the Chinese and the Russian drones and things like that. They're trying to frame it in that respect, and I don't hear anybody saying like, look, um, there was a flying cube, okay, a sphere with a cube in it, right? That the what's his name? The pilot saw off the coast of
Mm-hmm.
Virginia,
Yep.
right? The
Yep.
Ryan Graves. He describes this cube, this sphere with a cube in it. Okay, there was one of those in the Wytheville
Was there?
wave in 1987. So do you think they had did they have that kind of crazy drone technology in 1987? No, I don't think so. And did they have spheres that can go like thousands of miles an hour into the ocean and back out to the atmosphere? Did they have that? Because they've had that since, like, what is that, Cape
Yeah.
Girardeau
Yeah.
or whatever, 1941. Did they have that type of technology? So they're ignoring everything that happened before the Nimitz. Basically, like they're acting like UFOs began in 2004, and
That that
they're
is
they're
that is a hard
ignoring
one to get past.
everything
I agree.
before. So that's the problem I have with all the whistleblowers and all the, because they're framing it in such a way that there's no apology for all these people whose lives have been destroyed. There's no apology to all the people who have had abduction experiences and been laughed at and ridiculed and stuff like that. There's no apology to all the people who have called the Air Force or whatever and the police and reported these things and then been made fun of, and been a laughing stock. They're just acting like it just began, and this problem is not only did it just begin, it's the problem is really limited to these certain spaces over the ocean, over Catalina Island and off of Southern California or Chesapeake Bay. This is all you're
Yeah.
hearing about. You're not hearing about the thousands and thousands of other like sightings and experiences that people have had for so long. And so until there's some sort of acknowledgement of that, I'm just not really. I don't have any faith in the public face of UFO
Well, and
disclosure.
you would certainly think. Now, I get from the military aspect that we're not gonna give any other countries any information that might um, circumvent our national security.
Right.
But the UK has been way more open about their UFO investigations through the government for a lot of years. Um, it just seems to me that how strange that our military graves would have taken part in this congressional disclosure that happened down in Mexico, where they
Oh, that,
unveiled
yeah,
the ridiculously bad um, mummies, mummified remains of.
yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah. Those little alien things that they have there.
yeah. I mean that. Forget the name of the guy who has the show down there. He was like a big part of
Uh,
the disclosure there. Jaime, somebody. That guy's been outed as a hoaxer and
mm-hmm.
so many times over the years that it floored me to find out that they actually had him being a part of it. Everybody says, oh, these things were put through um, different types of x-rays and different types of um, scanning, for, and it's so ridiculous. I mean, they're not letting anybody in the States do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that have seen the MRIs of it, they're actually calling out what the bones that were put into these plaster mummies are, what they're from. And Ryan Graves, he was sent down there to kind of represent America in this thing, and he flat out refused
Funny.
to have his pictures taken by the mummies or any of that stuff. He didn't want anything to do with it.
It's funny. Yeah, I feel like when I saw him respond to it, and it felt like it felt like he may have been genuinely sort of duped into participating in that, and he was very embarrassed by that. But at the same time, my first reaction was when I saw him in that situation, uh, before he had apologized and everything. My first reaction was what I thought of was people like Richard Doty. You know that guy,
Yeah.
the CIA guy who
Right. Yeah.
who infiltrated MUFON and spread disinformation and stuff
Mhm.
all through the 80s. Like there's a lot of that that happens, like where these government so-called whistleblowers, a lot of times they're just out to be whistleblowers so they can get into this UFO community and then seed it with disinformation. And that's what I kind of first thought when I saw Ron Graves in that situation. It's like, oh, is he doing that? But I don't think he was. But it really made me think that. I mean, forgive me for being suspicious of these people, but
I think you have
I
to
think
be.
I think there's good reason to be very suspicious of anybody who carries any sort of security clearance when it comes to United States intelligence community.
my biggest fear, my biggest fear here is that for the majority of my life of believing in these things and never wavering, never falling away from it, never having a period of time where I was like, yeah, no, this ain't right. Um, to a few years ago, getting the first like limited disclosure that oh my god, the government is actually admitting these things are real. Um, my biggest fear is that we are no closer to knowing what they are or where they come from,
Yeah, I don't
and
think
that all of this is just one big distraction to get us to look the other way and
probably is.
to not see what I don't know. But
Yeah,
my fear is that we may not know anything more than we knew 40 years ago.
it probably is. I hear, you know, I personally, it seems more like we're talking about ultra terrestrials, other dimensional, maybe time travel, all these other sort of possibilities other than nuts and bolts spaceships from another planet type of hypothesis. Now, I personally feel that that's probably, it's if we ever got to a true explanation of it, it's going to have something to do with, it's going to have some mind blowing implications for what we think reality is, you know. Whereas, so therefore, I've always been kind of suspicious of crash retrievals, you know. But if you look into it, and that's where you put your effort is to research crash retrievals, you're going to find some real convincing evidence about crash retrievals, because it's out there. Um, Now, so I would say that the what can the government offer? What can the government offer in disclosure? You know, what do they know that we don't know? What, like, there's a community of people, you know, tens of thousands strong. I don't know how many people for so long. You know, whether it's from MUFON, you know, whether it's from you know, any manner of like independent people, podcasters, and people that, you know, investigators, run magazines and do, you know, people that have personal experiences. We've got the data that we have as private citizens has to be far exceed the data that the government has. You know, because
You would think.
you know, the only thing they could have that we don't have would be a crash retrieval. You know, that's really the only thing they have to offer, you know.
Yeah.
So if they have that, then I'd like to know about it, you know. But if they don't have that, then that puts them in a position just like us. They don't know any more than we do, you know, because I don't think that I really, my intuition tells me that Eisenhower didn't meet with aliens. You know what I mean?
I got to agree with that.
You know what I mean? I don't think they're that deep into it. I don't think that the aliens are negotiating with them and they have underground bases where they're working together and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. And then there
I
was
might
an
be wrong.
agreement to allow humans to be abducted
Right.
for their own nefarious purposes in return for
Yeah.
technology.
I mean, I've heard that. It makes a great story. If I'm wrong, then hey, I'm wrong. And I would love to know the truth, but I want to know the truth either way. But um, to me, my intuition tells me that they don't know where they come from or what they're doing here, and they have no control over it whatsoever, just as much as we don't know, you know. And when they do tell you where they come from, like they told Betty and Barney Hill and showed them that star map, you know, or told people they're from Venus, or tell people, you know, how much of that do you believe? You know,
Yeah.
how much do you believe them when they tell you that? You know, like, do you think they're telling you the truth? Because they seem kind of trickstery, you know.
Yeah.
So
And then you get into, again, Luis Elizondo, part of the intelligence community.
yeah,
But if you listen to him, he's a masterful. Uh, he's masterful at dropping breadcrumbs
yeah.
that will
Te-
kind of
He's
put.
good at teasing a story that never comes. You know.
Yeah, and he makes. I've seen him on several interviews where he talks about the the Pentagon official or general or whatever the hell it was that told him, "Hey Lou, let this stuff go. Back away from it
Mm.
and just stop." And he's like, "Okay, sir, but can I ask you why?" And he says, "We already know what they are." And he alludes to that it is based in religion and that they're actually demons.
All
And
right.
that what?
Oh, like, I watched so many interviews with Lou Elizondo when he first came out and started talking about all this. I watched every interview, and I listened very carefully to everything he said, and I was suspicious of him and everything from the get go because of who he was. But I watched and I listened and I tried to be open minded, and what I saw was a guy who made a bunch of promises and none of them ever happened.
Yeah.
You know, he was a guy who was like, later this year I'm coming out with some new evidence. It's going to rock the world. And then later that year it didn't come. Next year I'm coming out with some new evidence. It's gonna, and it's kicking it down the line so much. Now he's got a book that's coming out. He's pushing a book and stuff like that. It's like, I'm
And
just
what's he going to put in the book? What's he
yeah.
going to put in it? Because every time you
Wait,
hear him, there's things he can't talk about.
yeah, the book's going to be wait till part 2 of this book,
You
and I'll
know,
really tell you evidence.
and
It's like,
and here's the other thing. It's like, so you got Christopher Mellon, you got Luis Elizondo, you got these other people, and they all line up behind some dude who plays in Blink 182.
yeah, don't that seem a little suspicious? Like,
Well,
they're
you couldn't
playing the
pick a better person.
well, this guy. was willing to put up some money, and he was also willing to be played by these people. You know, that's what it seems to me. You know, like I don't. It just looked like he surrounded himself with people who are just got some shady pasts. You know, Hal Puthoff is in there.
Yeah.
You know, some people like I find these people interesting. You know, I'd love to interview them too, but that I don't believe if you know they're gonna have to, and especially Lou Elizondo. Like this guy's not. He's not. What's he revealed? You know, what is his big reveal? I haven't seen anything. You know,
Yeah.
I I don't. I have no idea what he's supposed to be like saying because every time, every question he's asked, he just arches around it like he's like, you're not much of a whistleblower if you're not saying anything.
If you're not blowing the whistle.
Yeah, yeah. So if like, I mean, it's not a situation. This is not like, um, putting military lives at risk because you're going to give away some, plans of, or some just where some base is or when some attack's going to
Yeah.
happen or anything like that. This is UFOs. You know, what do you know? And once you tell us what you know, okay, now we heard what you have to say. But there's not been any. It's just people saying, I know something and I'm going to tell you, and
Yeah.
if anybody, like if any one of us, like a regular everyday citizen were to have done that, we'd just be laughed out of the, out of the
And you know
room.
who else who does this? And I hate to say it because there have been some good things that have come out of this guy.
Mm.
Jeremy Corbell.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I
Yeah.
mean, he
He does
does
it
the
all.
same damn thing. You know,
Yeah.
you know, we
Got more
have
footage, all that stuff. And then releases that really goofy, like, what was that last thing with the spaghetti monster
looked like a
thing?
jellyfish. Yeah.
That is obviously some sort of drone. It's flying in a straight line over the, it's like, and then what was that? Do you know that the girl, I think her name is Christina Gomez, and she has a podcast also, but she actually went and found like this drone thing, and there was some footage of it. It looked exactly like that thing.
Really.
It looked exactly like it, and it showed people holding it. It was like some test footage of it, and there were people like holding it, and it was like flying out of their hand, into
Oh,
the
I have not heard
air.
about that. No.
And there's real. It was on her thing on her YouTube channel, and she posted that, and a bunch of people jumped down her throat and were like, Jeremy Corbell fans, I guess, jumped down her throat and were like, no, that's not the same thing. And it's like, man, I don't know that it is, but I saw both footage and it really looks like the same thing. It really does. So, I think Jeremy Corbell is well meaning and I think he really wants to be like, I think he's really
I
on.
agree. Yeah, I agree.
He's on. And I think he really wants to find the truth and put this stuff out there. And George Knapp also, I think I got confidence in him, but I didn't have confidence in that video,
Yeah,
and I don't.
it's a very strange one. I you know
I
I,
think they put too much stock in some of these whistleblowers too. To be honest, but
yeah. The one guy that I have really felt was credible is Commander Fravor.
oh yeah, 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 I
He
think
strikes me as being very credible. Even Ryan Graves struck
yeah,
me
definitely,
as being very credible. I really there's a caveat there. I got to put a little asterisk by that because why he was sent to the thing down in Mexico is beyond me, and that puts a little mark on him for me that I'm like, that doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
Well, thing is, like, Ryan Graves and those guys, Fravor, um, even David Grush or Grush or however you say his name. He like those guys, like, I can like them and I can think they seem credible, to me, but they're supposed to seem credible, you
Absolutely.
know, and um, I have to still look at them with the same suspicion that they would look at me, like if I like if the government if I go to the report a UFO sighting and say that, a UFO landed in my yard and aliens came out of the UFO and they took me on board the UFO and they did this and that to me and all that. And if I went to the government and reported that to them, they're going to look at me with a certain amount of suspicion, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's only understandable if I look at them with the same amount of suspicion.
What's your thoughts on Stephen Greer?
Man, it's tough. Uh, I'll tell you, Stephen Greer. Um, I hate to be in all these weird positions, but like I'm having to just move around. Um, it's hard, man, because I believe that he's credible on some of the things that he says, but I'm suspicious of anyone who charges a whole bunch of money and says they can put you in contact with aliens. You know,
Yeah.
like his CE5 stuff or whatever that he's doing.
Yeah.
Like where you pay me $1,000 and I'll I'll teach you how to communicate with aliens. That feels a lot. That feels a little televangelist to me. And and I've also seen him. He doesn't really ever do. I saw him. Do you ever watch Kurt John Mungle's podcast?
I don't.
He has a podcast. There's this guy. He's a mathematician and physicist, and he has a podcast, and it's called Theories of Everything. And he has all kinds of great thinkers on there from different, physicists and a lot of UFO stuff on there too. Well, he had Stephen Greer on there. After much, he tried to get him on forever, and it took a long time because Stephen Greer doesn't want to do anything but his thing. He wants to keep his stuff restricted to
Right.
his thing so he can monetize it in the way that he wants to monetize it. So he finally came on there, and it was like one of the most like rude and um like know it all. Anytime anybody I don't know, I'm suspicious of anybody who acts like they know the answer and they know it all because I don't really think anybody does.
Yeah.
And when you see people, that's why I like people I like Jacques Vallée because Jacques Vallée's been at this longer than just about anybody, and he'll admit that he doesn't know something. He'll say, I don't. It looks like this. It looks like it could be this. It bears the uh, resemblance of this, or it bears like possibility that it could be this, but I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody knows for sure. So when you have a lot of people like Stephen Greer has a lot of very specific answers that he's never. The word I don't know doesn't seem, or the phrase I don't know doesn't seem to even be in his vocabulary. It's like anytime he's asked a question, he has an answer for it. And sometimes maybe that's not. I don't know. It just doesn't seem as credible to me.
Well, it strikes me. I interviewed Klaus Svan from Sweden, oh, probably pretty close to a year ago now, and the thing that struck me with the 40 years, roughly 40 years of his investigating and researching and collecting and data mining and all the stuff that he's done as far as the UFO topic goes, how skeptical that man is. It was amazing to me that somebody could be that steeped in the topic and have remained that skeptical about that many things. He had very few things throughout his collection of information, whether it's anecdotal or evidence about sightings or witness accounts and stuff like that. There were very few things that he held with high regard as being actual and factual.
I think it helps to stay very skeptical, even in the light of like having, even if you've had an experience yourself, to stay skeptical but also stay open minded at the same time. Like, I don't know, I try to like consider everything and at the same time, so sometimes, so I go back and forth, and it's all right. Like, I think it's all right to, like, one day feel this way and then another day feel that way,
Mhm.
because we're not like, this isn't, we're not doing a deposition here, we're not like,
Yeah.
this is not, we're just trying to figure out, and as best we can, what we can figure out as individuals and, as collective, like, just, people who collect evidence, and so I think it's a healthy attitude to stay skeptical,
I
and also listen to everyone. I don't dismiss things out of hand, like, I'll listen to what, like, these people have to say to the government, for instance, like these whistleblowers and stuff. I'll listen to it, but there's only so long I'm going to listen to somebody saying, tomorrow I'll tell you more, um, but, one thing I did, on that topic, one thing that made me think we live in this is a great time to be alive, was when, I saw them coming out. They had the last hearing, they had the public hearing, and then they had the one where they, did it with the, intelligence. It was the private,
Yep.
intelligence hearing or whatever. And then they were coming out of that hearing, and I remember, the Congress, woman Luna,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
in on the panel. So she comes out there, and somebody asked her. They said, "I said, did you learn anything more than you knew, in there?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." And they said, "What? So what do they think? What's 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 in charge, or what's the cause of these UAPs? What's behind all this? And she said on C-SPAN, on and standing in the Capitol, like, well, in a legitimate, she said, interdimensional beings. And I was like, oh wow, I love being alive right now. That really made me so happy to see that, because I was like, wow, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's like a sitting congressperson, like, talk about interdimensional beings on, live on
Yeah.
C-SPAN. It was amazing. Yeah, it's worth looking up if you see, because they each come out, and they all have, Tim Burchett comes out, and, all the people who are on that panel,
Yeah.
like, come out, and they ask questions of each one of them when they come out. But when she comes out and says it, she says that the intelligence people told her it was interdimensional beings,
I like
and I was like,
Burchett.
huh,
I like him. I
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
get a bad feeling from seeing him speak. I
No, he seems like he really wants to know what's
Yeah,
up,
he seems like a salt of the earth guy. I mean, he's in
hmm
politics, so I mean, I think they're all
Yeah,
crooked to some extent. But
yeah,
you know, he may stand out in front of a large majority of people by not seeming to be as bad as everybody else is. And I think he is honestly looking to try to get the truth out. Um,
Every once in a while, you get a wild card in there who really wants
yeah,
to, really wants to find out the truth.
William, do me a favor. Let everybody know about um, your festival that you have coming up in June. Let
Mhm.
everybody know where they can find your books and anything else you have going on.
Okay. Yeah. Wytheville UFO Festival. It's June the 8th, and it will be held in Wytheville, Virginia, at the Wytheville Meeting Center, which is a large, um, really nice, indoor ballroom, situation. This will be our third year. Um, we'll probably have something close to 60 or 70 vendors we have a vendor mall area where we've got it sectioned off, and this will be authors and artists, and there will be, like, there'll be people there that are, like, psychics there that come there. There are all kinds of people that come, that you can meet and talk to, and that's the hanging out area. And then, we have some speakers on the other side. And this year we've got a great lineup of speakers. You can go to our website. It's wythevilleufofest.com, for more information about that. Um, and it's free to the public. You want to come out? We're not charging $1,000, and I can't teach you how to talk to aliens or whatever. But but I can introduce you to a lot of people that have some really interesting things to say about this subject. And you're certainly welcome to come and share your own stories about it too. We're going to have a panel at the end of the day where we're going to have all the speakers come out together, and then we're going to have because in the past we've had like a lot of people, in the audience have questions, and sometimes that runs into the next speaker each time, So I thought, well, this time what we'll just do, we'll just have everybody come out, and we'll have the audience. This will be your whole time where you can field questions to all the speakers. And we'll just have that that'll be the end of it. And then my books, Saucers Over Appalachia, and The Mad Gasser of Botetourt County, which is a true crime thing that happened in the 1930s around Roanoke, Virginia. Those are both available on Amazon. There are other websites that they're available on Amazon. Mystic Novelty is our company where we sell stuff on Etsy. We have an Etsy shop. It's called Mystic Novelty Company, and you can buy them off there too if you're more of an Etsy type of person. But yeah, that's about it.
Well, William, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time and sitting in with me tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's a good conversation.
It was a lot of fun. It's good to tear into some stuff now and again. And
I apologize for my crazy shaky camera situation, but I was having a problem. I'm doing like these very artistic, diagonal shots.
I noticed that.
Because I don't have any. My laptop was giving me problems, connecting, and so I had to resort to the phone. And
well, we got it done.
That's where we're at.
We got it done.
It's all right.
It's been a pleasure, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.